Welcome. It is Mitch. I'm on YouTube. If you haven't already, please click the subscribe button as we try to build this thing up. Last count, I believe, was 235. Goal for the end of the Packers season is 1,000 lofty goals. I think we'll get there. This is part two, if you missed the first part of the video, kind of looking at the running back position, because I think Green Bay has a lot of answers in place, right? We know what Josh Jacobs is going to bring to the table. When healthy, we know Marshawn Lloyd's going to be a part of the offense. I guess the question is how much, when, what situations, things of that nature. But there's a lot of things we don't know. How many are going to be on the final roster? Typically, we see Green Bay keep 3 in recent history. Could it be 4? With the injury concern to Marshawn Lloyd, do you keep Jacobs, Lloyd, Emmanuel Wilson, and Chris Brooks? Or is that third spot going to be a duel between Brooks and Emmanuel Wilson, and then you kind of have to weigh what your preferences are, what you're going to prioritize? So that was kind of part one of the video, looking at the running back position for Green Bay. Part two, you got to slide a little bit further down the depth chart. And through the first 2 weeks of the preseason, one of the conclusions I've come to is sort of watching the game against the Jets, watching the game against the Colts, and thinking, wow, there's like a legitimate battle going on between Amar Johnson and Israel Abanikanda. But I don't think it's for a roster spot. I think it's potentially for a practice squad spot. And I know, again, Marshawn Lloyd's injury foggies a lot of this. Like, if he's going to miss significant time, you know, we just saw that it said he's going to miss some time. And I think Adam Schefter of ESPN had a report that really put week 1 in doubt against Detroit, and it's a couple weeks away, so who knows. But if Green Bay, for whatever reason, wanted to pivot and say, we want to keep 4 right away for week 1 on the active roster, maybe you could see Abanikanda or Johnson scratch out a spot, but I really think the battle taking place is for a practice squad spot. And now some of you might pause initially and say, well, they could both make the practice squad, and I get that, but I think when you look at the numbers game overall for Green Bay, when Lloyd comes back at some point, and, you know, then you hope he's good to go for an extended period of time, because we haven't seen it yet, but if he is, you know, you have Lloyd, Jacobs, and then let's just say they keep Emmanuel Wilson and Chris Brooks. That'd be 4 on the active roster. And so when you start to balance out the numbers game, do you really then want 2 more on the practice squad for a grand total of 6 running backs? Like, not many teams are doing that. I don't know if any teams are doing that, right? Keeping 6 running backs total between the active roster and the practice squad. And it's not saying that Johnson and Abanikanda haven't earned that. Like, they've done nothing but step up to the plate and deliver so far in their reps and their snaps and their opportunities during the preseason. And then obviously some of it trickles into training camp as well. But we really see them, like, the preseason to me is not for, you know, Romeo Doubs and Xavier McKinney and Quay Walker and guys like that. Like, we know what their role is going to be. They're already established. The preseason's for a player like Amar Johnson, who Green Bay, you know, scoops up as an undrafted free agent, and it's kind of a filler piece. It's like, hey, let's take a flyer on this guy and see if there's anything there. And so far through 2 exhibition contests, Amar Johnson, if nothing else, has caused Green Bay to kind of sit back and say, wait a second, what do we want to do with this guy? What do we want to do with this guy? Instead of like, hey, thanks for coming in, good job at the preseason, maybe you'll catch on somewhere else. Amar Johnson's like, wait a second, do we want to stash this guy in the practice squad? We might not want to let him go. And Abanikanda is kind of doing the same thing for Green Bay. I was so impressed. Green Bay's first drive of the second half on Saturday, 14-play drive, results in a touchdown, and the touchdown comes via Abanikanda on a great play where he's like stood up and stopped. Like, his force stopped him at the 3-yard line, and he was stood up by the Colts defense, and then somehow just kept his legs churning and found a way into the end zone on a good touchdown run for Abanikanda. But what to me was more impressive is it was a 14-play drive, right out of the gates, first drive in the second half, and 11 of the plays were not only running plays. 11 of the 14 plays on that touchdown drive were runs by Izzy Abanikanda. And it gets to a point where for the Colts defense, there was a point in time in that 14-play drive, 5 straight plays were just handoffs to Abanikanda. And if you're the Colts defense, it gets to a point where, like, they're probably just going to give this dude the ball. Like, we're playing law of averages on this drive. They're just going to hand it to Abanikanda. And he still found means of success, despite Indianapolis probably having a good idea. Like, they're not going to go away from him. He's kind of carrying them on this drive. There are not too many touchdown drives in the National Football League, and I know it's the preseason, and I know Abanikanda probably, right, is not getting a 53-man roster spot, and he's playing against some backups, things of that nature. But you will not find too many drives in the NFL, even the preseason, where it's 14 plays 11 are run plays with the same damn guy. He caps it with a touchdown run. It was really impressive. And so I like what I see with Abanikanda. And he offers you the versatility. He had 5 kick returns for 120 yards in that game. And he had a tackle on special teams as well. And so I believe we might have like a duel going on between Amar Johnson and Izzy Abanikanda for a practice squad spot. And again, Green Bay could opt to keep both, but you're really, really pushing the parameters, I believe, of what you would want to do for the numbers game for the active roster and the practice squad by keeping 6 around. Now, I firmly believe if Green Bay, let's say they kept 3 running backs, and it's Josh Jacobs, Marshawn Lloyd, and one of Chris Brooks or Emmanuel Wilson, whoever is on the outside of that picture, whoever gets cut between Brooks and Wilson is absolutely probably going to get signed by another team. It's just Green Bay maybe wanting to keep 3. Maybe Marshawn Lloyd's good for week 1 against Detroit. We'll find that out as the days sort of carry along. But as it trickles down, as I mentioned, deeper to the depth chart, and you look at these practice squad candidates, and again, it comes up with Amar Johnson and Abanikanda. And with Abanikanda, he was waived by San Francisco at the end of July. Green Bay swooped in pretty quickly, picked him up. And again, I thought it was like you're taking a flyer on a guy. 5th-round pick, I believe. I think he was a 5th-round pick in 2023 by the Jets out of Pittsburgh. He had a very, very long resume in a good way at Pittsburgh. Like, this dude ran against some pretty damn good defenses in the ACC when he was with Pittsburgh in college. Waived by San Francisco. Green Bay picks him up, and I recognized the name, but I was like, oh, it's, you're taking a flyer on a guy. It could be just a depth piece for the preseason and for training camp. You don't want a lot of wear and tear on Josh Jacobs coming out of the preseason, right? You'd prefer not to even use him in the preseason. And then, you don't know how much you want to use Marshawn Lloyd. He ends up getting the hamstring injury in the second game this past Saturday against Indianapolis. And so you pick up a guy like Abanikanda, but just like Amar Johnson, through his opportunities, and especially against Indianapolis on Saturday, if nothing else, he's causing Green Bay to sit back and say, wait a second, what do we want to do about Abanikanda? Because it's not as simple as, hey, thanks for coming in, filled a role for us, needed it, you got some, meaningful snaps, some meaningful reps on tape, maybe another team will pick you up, take a chance on you. Green Bay's that team that's saying, we probably don't want to get rid of this guy. And when you talk about a practice squad battle between Johnson and Abanikanda, I think Abanikanda probably has a leg up because of the ability to return kicks, and we saw him on teams make a tackle and kick coverage. Amar Johnson, beautiful touchdown run against the Jets, one of the lone highlights in the first preseason game. Runs through the right side, pinballs off a defender, bounces it back to the left, takes it 39 yards to the end zone. Again, the only touchdown for Green Bay in their first exhibition game against the Jets. Followed it up, had another touchdown against the Colts last Saturday. I like what Matt LaFleur said after that game against the Jets. LaFleur was asked about Amar Johnson. This is after the first preseason game. And LaFleur said, and I quote, "I thought it was a good showing for him." He's talking about Amar Johnson. "I thought he ran hard and obviously flashed some playmaking ability. He'll probably earn some more opportunities next week." And then next week was the game on Saturday against Indianapolis, and Johnson finished with 8 total touches. And so he took his initial opportunities, took advantage of it, and parlayed it into getting more opportunities or equal opportunities in that second game. Whereas if he struggled against the Jets, didn't really flash, didn't really show anything, maybe Green Bay's like, hey, let's put more on Abanikanda's plate, right? Maybe we play Emmanuel Wilson a little bit more, but maybe we play Chris Brooks a little bit more. Instead, it was, this dude was a lone bright spot for the offense against the Jets. Let's give him more opportunities. So he got 8 touches. He didn't, pop as much against the Colts as he did against the Jets, talking about Amar Johnson. But again, you take those opportunities you get when you're a guy that's scratching for maybe a practice squad spot, long shot as a final 53-man roster guy, but you parlay it into more and more opportunities because you're showing up and you're stepping up to the plate. And for Abanikanda, again, I go back to it, a 14-play drive where 11 of the plays are just turn and hand, turn and hand, turn and hand to Abanikanda, and he caps it with a strong touchdown run. Incredibly impressive on top of the 5 kick returns for 120 yards and the tackle he had on team. So I think if Green Bay wanted to, you'd like to keep both guys around probably, but I just don't think it makes sense logically, again, when you're talking about the numbers game taking place. If Green Bay, because like Emmanuel Wilson's, Chris Brooks, those aren't, practice squad candidates. Those aren't practice squad guys. But if Green Bay keeps 4 running backs coming out of training camp of the preseason, coming out of this summer, it's going to be Jacobs, Lloyd, Brooks, and Wilson. And then again, the domino effect to that is, do you really want 2 more on the practice squad? Probably not. You already are going to have Wilson and Brooks, who are going to probably have limited opportunities, and they're on the active roster, at least offensively. Chris Brooks, of course, can play special teams. And then do you want 2 more? It muddies up the picture, and then you're trimming down at another position, and perhaps at another position or 2 in a pretty substantial way if you're opting to keep 6 running backs between the active roster and the practice squad. If they keep 3 and you cut either Wilson or Brooks, they get scooped up by someone else, then maybe you're like, let's just stash away Amar Johnson, Abanikanda. Hopefully no one plucks them off our practice squad, and then we got 5. 3 on the active roster, which we normally do. Again, I'm thinking through the prism of Green Bay, and then 2 on the practice squad. And these 2 guys that we really, again, the phrase I'm using, just took a flyer on these 2 guys, and both have showed out so far in the preseason for Green Bay. I saw Abanikanda. I'm trying to find it real quick. He had a cool quote. He was just like pumping up the whole running back group since his arrival to Green Bay. Because keep in mind, this guy wasn't with Green Bay in April as like an undrafted free agent. Like, he was drafted in the 5th round. I think it was the 5th round again in 2023 by the Jets. And he waived by the Niners in late July, scooped up by Green. Like, he's only been with the Packers for a few weeks now, a couple of weeks. And after the game, I found the quote. Abanikanda talking about, or was really asked about the game, his performance, the opportunities, things of that nature. And his quote was crediting all the running backs. Shout out to Amar. Shout out to Marshawn. Marshawn's back out running there. Of course, he got hurt. We know that. Shout out to E. He was talking about Emmanuel Wilson. He said you see E running over somebody, that truck stick that Emmanuel Wilson had on the far sideline in the first half. And he said you got Ty 2. He just came in running that thing. Chris ran 2, talking about Chris Brooks. So you have a guy in Abanikanda who's really had a standout performance for Green Bay, and here he is like crediting all the other running backs in the room. So you would hope that would lend some credence to the idea that this is probably a pretty tight-knit group that Green Bay has. But in terms of kind of tearing things off, Josh Jacobs is in that top tier by himself. And then I think I said in the first video in part 1 of this, talking about the running back position, ideally Green Bay would like Marshawn Lloyd to be the number 2, be the change of pace guy to Josh Jacobs, and see a decent, like, I say he's going to get, 25 to 30 snaps a game, but Green Bay would like to get the ball in Marshawn Lloyd's hands a few times a week, right? But he's got to overcome these injury hurdles that just keep popping up, and you feel for the dude. And then you have Emmanuel Wilson and Chris Brooks, and that's why I think the Abanikanda Johnson storyline is fun to track and it's fun to follow. And I know some are they're different running backs, right? Like Abanikanda is kind of more of like a slasher. He's more quick. Whereas Amar Johnson, when you're watching him, he's more short, stout, kind of like a bowling ball. When he's out there, like that touchdown run he had against the Jets, it was almost like he just bounced off one defender and then kicked it back to the left and waltzed his way into the end zone. So they are 2 different running backs. So I know some are going to say, I'd rather see Amar Johnson stick on the practice squad, and others are going to fall in the Abanikanda camp, and it's perfectly fine. I would imagine Green Bay, if they do go one way or another, maybe lean Abanikanda. Like, is there an outside chance, and this might be crazy talk, because you would imagine Keyshawn Nixon is probably your kick returner this year. And it seems like Green Bay is trying to give McCole Hardman an opportunity to earn a roster spot, labeled as a wide receiver, but perhaps his biggest contribution will be coming as a punt returner, right? But we saw 2 miscues against the Jets. He was fine in his opportunities at punt returner against Indianapolis. But is it crazy? I think it is. I'm still going to pose the question, but is it crazy to suggest, like, could Abanikanda make the roster as a kick returner? But if you do that, you're almost certainly cutting Brooks or Wilson, because you're not carrying 5 running backs on the active roster. But Abanikanda, it wasn't just 1 or 2 opportunities. He had 5 kick returns. I think Ballantyne had 1 against Indianapolis. I would imagine, you're not putting Keyshawn Nixon out on the field to return kicks in the preseason. Like, he can get those reps in training camp where, he is not going to be at risk of getting, like, drilled by the opposition. But I do think it's noteworthy that Abanikanda returned 5. A couple of them were pretty nice returns by Abanikanda. And so I'm kind of spitballing here. I think it's very, very, very far-fetched to suggest that Abanikanda could earn a roster spot under the premise of Green Bay saying, hey, we really like what we saw in the return game. You're our kick returner. That's why you made the team. Because, again, then you're either keeping 5 running backs or you're keeping 4, but you're cutting Wilson or Brooks out of the picture for a guy who's making the team at the running back position, but his role really specified would be as a kick returner. Again, I'm just spitballing. It's a really, really far-fetched idea, but I personally like what I've seen from Abanikanda so far in the green and gold, and I'm excited to see what sort of opportunities he and Amar Johnson get against Seattle. I believe I don't think Jordan Love's playing, but if I'm not mistaken, LaFleur said the starters or a lot of the starters are going to play, but you're going to have a quick hook on them in the final. The last thing you want is playing some starters for one extra drive and then someone has like some sort of devastating injury. I don't even want to put it out into the universe by mentioning that, but I'm imagining it's going to be a short hook on the starters that do play against Seattle, and then we're going to get familiar with the names that we've really seen in these exhibition games, especially at running back with Amar Johnson and Israel Abanikanda. So I don't think either has a real great shot to make the the final 53-man roster, and really it's nothing that they've done or haven't done. It's just a stacked room for Green Bay. Like, they already are going to have a problem on their hands, and it's a good problem to have. Do we keep 3 or 4? That's a good problem to have because you certainly have 4 that you can make a legitimate case for. And I'm certain that in some situations, in some running back rooms, Abanikanda would be a guy where they're like, we could see him being our 4th running back. It's just that in Green Bay, those first 4 spots, when Lloyd is healthy, are already filled. So they're filled to the brim. And that's why I think the more realistic way to view this is, hey, there's a hell of a practice squad, perhaps one spot at a running back position battle going on in the preseason between Amar Johnson and Abanikanda. Again, they could keep both theoretically, but then you're talking about potentially having 6 between the active roster and the practice squad. And to me, the numbers game there just doesn't make sense because you'd have to trim down at a couple of other positions, and you probably don't want to do that. So Amar Johnson is very similar to when I was talking about in part 1. If you watched that, if you didn't, give it a click, please. Give it some watch time. Part 1 in that Emmanuel Wilson, he's just a pure runner. Like, Emmanuel Wilson's the second best pure running back, like, to the definition running back on the team, I would say, behind Josh Jacobs. But Chris Brooks has versatility. Chris Brooks can pass block way better than Emmanuel Wilson. Chris Brooks might be the best pass blocking running back on the roster. And he can play teams for Rich Bisaccia as a valued piece, not as like a throw Chris Brooks out here or there on kick coverage, kickoff return, things of that, not as a returner, but out there on the unit. Like, Chris Brooks is a valued piece for Bisaccia on special teams. And you can look at Amar Johnson and Abanikanda, and it's kind of similar in that Amar Johnson, kind of just like a pure running back. You just want to get him the ball, see what he can do as sort of a bowling ball type running back. Whereas with Abanikanda, it's like, yeah, you can use him as a running back, but you can use him on kick coverage. You can use him on kick return as the kick returner. And so I think it's kind of similar where if versatility wins out, and we know how much Green Bay values that, I give the slight edge to Abanikanda over Amar Johnson. Would love to see them both stay in the green and gold in some capacity. In all likelihood, that would mean both of them on the practice squad. But I go back to it one more time as we close out. The numbers game there doesn't make sense. I don't want Green Bay keeping 6 running backs, 4 on the active roster, 2 on the practice squad. Doesn't make logical sense unless you're expecting 3 guys to go down throughout the course of the season. Again, that's a thought that entered my mind, and I just spewed it out, and I wish I hadn't even said it. Wish I hadn't put it out in the universe. So we'll see, but it's fascinating. The running back position, it's easy to gloss over it because, like, we look at defensive end, and we're like, everyone's nervous and shuddering. Like, what is Lucas Van Ness year 3? Is he gonna rise to the occasion and deliver, or is it gonna be another dud of a year? And then you're like, we took this dude in the first round, and 3 years in, we haven't seen shit. Like, is that what it's gonna be with Van Ness? And you're looking around at other positions, like, what is Javon Bowler's role gonna be? Is he gonna be a starting slot, Or is that going to be Hobbs or Keyshawn Nixon, and then Valentine could play the boundary at one of the starting spots? Like, who's going to be the left tackle? Jordan Morgan's been incredible through 2 preseason games. I think 61 snaps at left tackle. Hasn't allowed a pressure, hasn't allowed a quarterback hurry, hasn't been penalized even once. Or will it be Rasheed Walker as he's brought back into the picture? He was nicked up a little bit earlier in training camp. Like, there's so many exciting angles, storylines, position battles to watch that I think it's very easy to look at the running back position and just say, Josh Jacobs. And that's fair. Like, Josh Jacobs is going to be the bell cow again. And then it's like, Marshawn Lloyd, super exciting, needs to stay healthy. And then after that, we forget about the rest. But we forget about the rest, and part of that is Emmanuel Wilson, who was second on the team in carries, second on the team in rushing yards, second on the team in rushing touchdowns a year ago. You have Chris Brooks, who's kind of like a Swiss Army knife on your team. And then you get to these guys, the extras, if you will, and Amar Johnson and Izzy Abanikanda. And so I think it's a fascinating battle that will continue to unravel through this weekend in Seattle. And then Green Bay is going to have a really, really tough decision on their hands, plural, but it's a good spot to be in. Green Bay is not like, holy crap, we have Josh Jacobs and nothing else, but we got to keep a couple guys. It's, damn, we got 4 we could definitely keep on the active roster. In some years, Abanikanda or Amar Johnson could certainly be a 4th, but now they're both practice squad, candidates. But do we want to keep both one? It's a good problem for Green Bay to have, and we'll see how it sort of sorts out as the summer starts to close down in Green Bay in a short period of time here after this week, and we'll start to turn the page and start to focus in on that Detroit matchup week 1 at Lambeau Field. Let me know what you guys and gals think. Always appreciative of all the support. Please click the subscribe button if you haven't already. It is Mitch Heim on YouTube. We'll see you next time.